Hi again everyone, this is Apollo, and I tried making this video 3 times. so I had some audio problems and stuff. So basically I went over 50 minutes recording this, so this time I'm gonna try to keep it very short. So here's a timer. So let me give you a little bit the background about what happened here. So basically, for decades now, I've been playing the Metal Gear Solid games since they came out, all of them, since Metal Gear Solid 1. I've held 40 world records in Metal Gear Solid games, but particularly out of these 3 games, only 36 of those records, so Metal Gear Solid 2. And I've been playing the IP since then. I've known Kojima himself, I know a lot of people in Kojima Productions myself, we're good friends. I have a Metal Gear Solid tattoo, I know everything there is to know about Metal Gear as far as I can tell. So basically, you could say I'm a little bit of a nerd about Metal Gear, and I've had for a long time a difficulty in figuring out which game to recommend first, or which one is the best game. I've had this conversation many times, and usually I come to the conclusion that there's one that is like the best for beginners, there's one that is like the best average, and there's the one that has the highest highs, but also the lowest lows. Some of you who already know about Metal Gear probably can guess which one is which very easily. But I want to, so yesterday I talked to some friends about this, because I've been replaying the Master Collection, which has been a little bit disappointing in terms of the quality of the ports and stuff like that, but still the games are fantastic. And they all asked me, I told them, okay, so this is the best one. And they all told me, you're crazy, like there's no way that's the best one. The best one is this one or this one. And basically it seems like a lot of people kind of like wonder why I think the way I think. So I figured out, I'll break it down for you guys. And and if anyone else is interested, of course, I would love to hear their opinions. And so let's go with it. I don't want to waste a lot of time. So first, several caveats, several things to talk about first. The first one is that, first of all, I have a bias, and I recognize it because even though I've sped run the 3 games, I'm very good playing the 3 games. I've played all of them for hundreds and hundreds of hours. The best one, the one that I've played the most and the one that I'm really good at, is Metal Gear Solid 2. That's the one that I have 36 world records in, and so I know that one in and out, and I've spent more time with that one. I spent a lot of time with all of them. All of them are sped run. Metal Gear Solid 1, I was within 13 or 16 seconds of the world record for a while. Metal Gear Solid 3, right now I played it in like an hour and a half, something like that as well, like an hour and 40 minutes, not counting cinematics, credits and all of that stuff. Because I've replayed them in chronological order this time, so Metal Gear Solid 3, then 1, then 2, and I will emulate 4, or maybe I will wait for the Master Collection 2. I don't know if 4 is going to be there. I didn't play this time Peace Walker, even though I've played it many times, of course, and I used to also speedrun Revengeance, obviously, but I'm not including those here. I wanted to play Big Boss's story in chronological order, so I'm going to play 4 next. And like I said, the ports are not great, but it's giving me the opportunity to kind of like reflect on the games from a better perspective, now with over 10 years of experience in the game industry as a game designer, combat designer, so like I'm game director now. So basically all the things we're going to touch on, also the AI design and so on, so I can speak to it on a more professional level. But I also look at it from a player's perspective, and particularly from a first player perspective, that's people who play the game for the first time. So that's the first caveat, is that I'm biased. The second is that I look at it a little bit from a perspective of a new player. Another caveat is that all of these games are masterpieces. The 3 games are 9.5s, 9.7s, 9.8s, 10s. There's one of these games that is a straight up 10, which is Metal Gear Solid 1. But it's not what's necessarily going to reflect here. You will see in a few minutes. It was a 10 for the time. And I'm hair splitting, basically. I'm splitting hairs here. If I say that the pacing in one is really bad and the one in the other is really good, it's such a small difference compared to other games. Or like the atmosphere is a little bit better in this one or that one. The difference is very small in terms of like the whole gamut of 1 to 10 video games, right? I'm gonna do 1 to 5, by the way. When I do a 1, it doesn't mean it's a bad game. It means it's the worst of the 3 per here present, which are all masterpieces. If I have a 5, it doesn't mean it's a 10 out of 10 game. It means in that specific thing is the best of these 3 games. I will try not to get into too many decimal points, but I will have to do it at some points. So anyway, without further ado, those are the caveats, and let's get into the categories themselves. You will see over here, we will need to analyze later the graph because it will be important to explain some points of my thinking. So let's start. What I will do, by the way, is also start vertically. So I will do the narrative for 3 games, pacing for 3 games, instead of everything for one game, because it's a comparison between the 3 games. I don't want to say, oh, this game is a 9 or a 10 in absolute terms. I want to say this one is better than that one, right? Obviously, it's subjective, but I think it's a pre-informed analysis, considering that I just played them this last week and that I'm relatively knowledgeable about these things. So let's start. Narrative, Metal Gear Solid 1. I always say that Metal Gear Solid 1 is the best movie of the 3 games. The narrative is very cohesive, very consistent. There is one small loophole about the stealth camouflage and stuff like that, but it's the best movie of all of them. I mean, it is no secret that it's based heavily, let's say based, it's like stolen basically, almost from Escape from LA. Obviously in Metal Gear Solid 2 we have actually a wink about it with Snake Plissken, so it's not like super stolen, but clearly there's a lot of influence. At least Kojima admits about it, up to it, right? So this is a 5. We're gonna talk about characters and bosses later, but this game is amazing, right, in terms of narrative. And if I would say, if you are a newcomer to the Metal Gear Solid franchise, or if you were to play only one game, this would be the one in terms of narrative. Now, Metal Gear Solid 2 is a very difficult one because Metal Gear Solid 2 is the best in the terms of meta. What does that mean? In the terms of like foreseeing what social media was going to do, social influence, like social manipulation, propaganda, which of course is a concept that is very old, but how they talk about it, how Kojima talks about it, that's the best one. It's the best meta. It's just incredible. Like also the meaning of the game. Obviously in Metal Gear Solid 1, we have the whole meaning about a strong man doesn't need to read the future, he makes his own. Your genes don't determine your future, your willpower determines your future, and you have to live, right? Kind of like cheesy at the end, how heavy on the nose that was, but of course, what would a Metal Gear game be without a little bit of cheesy parts, right? Metal Gear Solid 2 is much deeper than that, and it can be analyzed for hours and hours, and other people have done it. I'm not gonna do it here, but it definitely has a lot more meaning, a deeper meaning to it, right? Social control, memes, genetics as well, what to live for the future, and so on. And I actually think that the ending is very profound. Since you get to Arsenal Gear, to the Junon and all of that, you start have the conversations with the Colonel, with Rose and all of that, and then with Snake, it's the best. Now, in terms of the relationship between the game and the player, represented as Solid Snake and Raiden, we're going to talk about that in a little second, but it's also very, very good. In my opinion, much better than Big Boss and the Boss. I think I'm getting a bit sick, so hopefully this won't go too long. So for now, I'm going to give it a 5 because I don't want to separate between narrative and meta-narrative. It is true that for a first-time player, the narrative is a little bit strange because of all the backtracking and because of all the things that don't make sense. For example, the Colonel and Rose seem very annoying and like it doesn't make sense, but if you analyze the whole being an AI thing, it starts making more sense. But it's not like a good entry for people who are only gonna play one game, or like the first time you play it and you don't analyze it, you're just like, oh, whatever, that game was weird, I don't touch it again. It's not a good game for that kind of player. But for the, let's say, the thinking player, to say in some way, I mean, it's a little bit arrogant to call it that way, but for the thinking player, I think it's the deepest game. And the problem with Rose and all of that is really not a problem of the narrative itself, it's a problem of characterization. So I'm gonna give it a 5 as well. Now, Metal Gear Solid 3 also has a fantastic narrative. And here, by the way, so Metal Gear Solid 1 is a 5 straight up. Metal Gear Solid 2 really is a 4, but the meta is like a 7, right? So I have to bring it up to 5. I try not to give the same scores to different games, but this is a special case. So because of that, Metal Gear Solid 5 cannot be a 5. Metal Gear Solid 3 cannot be a 5. Metal Gear Solid 3 is a great story. It's a little bit campier, but it's intentional and it's in a good way, but it's a little bit convoluted. It's not as straight and clear cut as Metal Gear Solid 1 for a first player, for someone who comes into the new experience of Metal Gear, and it's also not as deep as Metal Gear Solid 2. So sure, the relationship between the boss and Snake is really interesting, and Naked Snake in this case, but it's not as good as Snake and Raiden, for example, or Snake and Ocelot. We're going to talk about that in a second. But as a pure narrative, I'm going to have to give it a 4 because it's really good, but it's a bit too convoluted for the first time player. Yeah, sure, for someone who's loved the series, it's very interesting because it fills up a little bit the gaps about the Patriots, about like the legacy and all these things, or like Big Boss and all of that stuff. But I think Metal Gear Solid 3 as your first Metal Gear is not the strongest story out of the 3. So I'm gonna give it a 4. I'm going way faster than my previous video because the previous one was 50 minutes. I'm tired and like my throat is itching from talking so much. We're already at 11 minutes in this video, and we're only in one of the things. Now, pacing. So I don't consider pacing exactly the same as narrative because it also includes things like level design, gameplay, characters and bosses and stuff like that. But basically, this category only exists to lower the points of Metal Gear Solid 2. Everyone says, oh man, you're super biased about Metal Gear Solid 2, you think it's so much better than it is, Metal Gear Solid 3 is the best, blah blah. No, don't get me wrong. The pacing in Metal Gear Solid 5 is perfect, but the pacing in Metal Gear Solid 2 is absolutely awful. Why? Because there's too much backtracking, particularly like the whole area that you have to go like 20 times through, which is like the strat E to F. I hate that area. And Shell Core 1, all that whole area is a fucking mess. And just having to go back and forth, like 3 times you have to go to strat F to get a weapon from another part. Like the whole MIMRX section is terribly slow. But the most important thing, in Metal Gear Solid 1, there's probably like 12 force codec calls. In Metal Gear Solid 3, there's probably like 18 force codec calls. In Metal Gear Solid 2, there's at least 30 or 40 forced codec calls. That's absolute bullshit, man. That's totally not acceptable. And you could argue, well, in Metal Gear Solid 3, some of the codec calls last 7 or 8 minutes. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so please do that in Metal Gear Solid 2 so I can just skip one, please. Particularly like towards the end of the game, but it's not even towards the end of the game, it's like the whole game is just codec call. Yes, I understand that in the meta, it's supposed to be you being indoctrinated by the S3 program. I understand that. It's still bad game design, so I'm gonna give it a 2. Metal Gear Solid 3, the pacing is fantastic, wonderful, particularly towards the beginning of the game. It slows down a little bit, in the middle, but then particularly towards the end, there's a little bit too many cinematics and like the whole Eva section running in the background and all of that stuff. That's a little bit slow, so I'm gonna give it like a 4, but it's really almost a 5, so I'm gonna give it like a 4.5, right? So I try not to do a lot of decimals, but in this case it's almost perfect, right? Now, characters and bosses. This is one that I've heard a lot of people mention, when I talk to them about this. Some people love Metal Gear Solid 3, some people love Metal Gear Solid 1, and I think it's a difference in style. So people who just want super campy, super crazy characters that totally jump the shark, and they don't care about that, Metal Gear Solid 3 is perfect for you. Right? Those characters are absolutely ridiculous, but they're super fun, right? Like the end is absolutely ridiculous, but he's super cool. The fear is completely ridiculous. The pain, it's less ridiculous. It's like the most boring of all of them, right? But it's still kind of like campy, right? On the other side, Metal Gear Solid 1 all of them are actually credible. Like, or Revolver Ocelot could be a real person. I mean, obviously the Koi Octopus maybe not, but or Psycho Mantis is not realistic, but it's like the most realistic in the series, right? Like, they don't do crazy stuff yet. It's like still a little bit weird, but like not super crazy. So in terms of fighting the action, okay, so I'll go on one first. Okay, so bosses, very fun, but like not mechanically that great, but like still pretty good, for a PlayStation 1 game is pretty good. The actual narrative, the actual characters is fantastic. And Solid Snake is straight up one of the best characters in history. It's like probably like top 7 video game characters of all time. More so even because of Metal Gear Solid 2, interesting like 1. But 1 is already like 90% of the characters there, right? We're just only missing like the mentor section of his character. So this is like a 5, straight up, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot of things to be said, like Gray Fox, Solid Liquid Snake is really, really cool. So this is like a 5. Right? This is really, really, really good characters and bosses and stuff. I'm gonna lower to 4 because of the bosses. It's not as good as in other games. Well, actually no, I'm gonna keep it at 5. Metal Gear Solid 2. Now, the characters and bosses. So, the bosses of Metal Gear Solid 2, excuse me. The bosses are a little bit lower. The fights are better. But for example, Fatman is so bad, it's so annoying. But for example, Vamp is really cool. Olga is okay. The new Grey Fox, so Olga again, it's pretty cool. So those are okay, and the fights are okay. Then we have the good thing about the game is Solid Snake, Otacon, and Raiden. Those are amazing. People complain about Raiden, but actually it's not a Raiden problem, it's a Rose problem. We'll talk about that in a second. Snake grows into this mentor, badass, ultra amazing guy, like that is wiser now. He's not cynical anymore, he's actually wiser, and he lives with like, really interesting things to think about, for example, about finding your own meaning for life and fighting for it, fighting for what you believe in. That's also part in 1 as well. In 1, by the way, obviously, the whole thing about a strong man doesn't need to read the future. He makes his own, fighting the genetic programming and like your destiny and all of that. That's fantastic as well. That's part of the narrative and part of Solid as well. But in 2, he grows into a better character, even more so. Because you don't lose the character in 1, you just add to it. And people hate on Raiden, but actually Raiden is basically like an insert for the player. And how Solid treats Raiden is really interesting. There's a lot of mentoring and growing and coming into your own as a human being, but also as a player. And a lot of times I just feel like it's Kojima talking to the player, particularly at the end when he says, this is what I live for, and etc., to share what I've lived, my sorrow, my pain, blah, blah, all of that stuff. And that was very emotional, actually. So I think their relationship is really, really interesting. It's a more human touch to the whole Solid Snake side than Metal Gear Solid 1. I like it. Raiden is like basically the newbie who's learning. It's a very needed part of the narrative, right? It's like the hero's goal, basically. And Otacon excels in Metal Gear Solid 2. I think a lot of people find him a little bit annoying and stuff like that. That's a pacing problem, that's not an Otacon problem. I thought that there was a very Dostoevskian moment in probably one of the most brilliant moments in Kojima's writing career is when Otacon loses Emma, or Emma dies, and Otacon is grieving over her. And he knows he needs to do what he needs to do, and Solid pushes him to do it, and Raiden supports him. But after he closes the door, he breaks down nonetheless. And it reminds me of the Brothers Karamazov, when the girl on the wheelchair breaks her own fingers against the wall after she's broken up with Ilyusha. Very Dostoevskian moment, and I think Kojima is showing like a more mature side of his writing than he's ever done before. So I think characters and bosses, because Solid is so good here, I'm gonna give it a 5. The bosses are like a 4 or a 3.5, but Solid is really amazing. Oh, and this is the reason why this is a 5. Solidus is fucking amazing. Solidus is the original boss. People think the boss is so cool, blah blah. Yeah, she's great, but she actually doesn't do much in the game. She actually doesn't do much. She doesn't say much. She never tells you what she's doing. Ava tells you what she's doing, and people say, "Oh, the boss sacrificed herself and stuff." But if you actually look at it from John's eyes, from Big Boss's eyes, she's kind of a bitch, because why is she acting like that? She could have give you a hint that something was going on, right? Or that she was on her side. So at the end, okay, a little bit, but really it's very little compared to the betrayal that she did to Big Boss after so many years together and stuff like that. I don't think that she's as great a character as people think she is. She only has a few fleeting moments of greatness, really, while Solidus is the original son of liberty. He's the original liberator of mankind, the original. I could talk about this for a long time, but he is originally the one who wants to free people from the tyranny of the Patriots, you know, and how he orchestrates everything in order to achieve that, and you know how he pushes Jack, Raiden, you know, to achieve everything he can be and so on. I think Solidus is amazing. He's also a very cool character, very cool fight. So I'm gonna give it a 5 because Solidus is awesome. And he is the real MVP of the show, of the series. Actually, he's the one who actually wants freedom from all these tyrannies. You know? He's basically the brain to Solid's soul and muscle. Let's put it that way. Metal Gear Solid 3. The bosses are super campy, super crazy, but they're also very fun to play. So I'm gonna give it also a 5 actually, because you know, Ava is really cool. Ocelot is amazing. So Ocelot, only for Ocelot we have to give it a 5, right? Oh, by the way, Metal Gear Solid 2, Ocelot and Liquid jumps the shark completely. I'm trying to go fast, so I'm like a little bit more scatterbrained now than I was in my previous video. But yeah, I'm gonna have to lower Metal Gear Solid 2 a little bit, because the whole liquid arm thing is just stupid. It doesn't make any sense, and it's like, I don't know what Kojima was thinking. He tried to fix it in 4 unsuccessfully, in my opinion. So he didn't do a great job there. But back to Metal Gear Solid 3, Eva is cool and all. You know, it's a little bit like repetitive character. It reminds me a little bit of like in Berserk. You know, when what's her name? The girl I forget now, Kafka or something like that. By the middle of the manga, she just becomes like this trope, you know, like oh, every time you need guts to get angry, someone is gonna rape her. You know, it's like whatever, you know. So Ava just becomes like this hypersexualized, which I'm all for, you know. I love a hypersexualized female in a video game as much as any hot-blooded male, but it just gets boring. It's like, okay, yes, we get it. She's got big tits, you know, and at the end she's a little bit cheesy, you know, and all of that, but she's pretty good. Also, that is amazing. The boss is less than people assume her to be, honestly. Like everyone is like, oh, the boss. Honestly, play the games again and you will see she barely does anything. You know, like she's just like quiet and brooding and doing what she's told to do all the time. Not in the sense of the overall narrative, but like every time someone needs to deactivate a bomb or something, she just goes and does it. And like, she could have been much more interested, I think, if she wasn't such like, they tried so hard to make her into a badass that like she lost her soul in the process a little bit until the end, and by the end it's like, yeah, okay, she's super cool, but is she as cool as Solidus? No, for sure not. Is she in 2? Is she as cool as Solid in 2 and 1? No, for sure not. Or Ocelot in 1? No. Big Boss is also not as cool as Solid Snake, in the sense that, yeah, he's like an unwise, naive version of Solid Snake, and he's a badass, don't get me wrong. He's like, again, we're splitting hairs here between a 9 and a 7 and a 10, right? So He's funnier than Solid Snake for sure. He's a more human character, that's for sure. But he doesn't have. He is a passive receiver of wisdom and information, while Solid is actually transformed. You don't see the transformation in Big Boss beyond the emotional expression on his face. You don't actually see what he's learned because he doesn't tell you about what he's learned. Metal Gear Solid 1, Solid has learned a lot of things and he comes to a realization as a character. In Metal Gear Solid 2, he is the wise one giving you wisdom or information so you can have a realization. Big Boss doesn't have a realization. He's betrayed, obviously, and but he's a passive receiver of events, basically, which you could argue, yeah, it's the same situation as Raiden. Okay, but the difference is that the boss didn't teach Raiden how to become his own man. So she didn't teach Big Boss how to become his own man. Solid taught Raiden how to become his own man, and by the end of the game, Raiden had changed. But Big Boss doesn't change, he only becomes resentful. You could argue that's changed, but it's not on the same level of depth. So, because the bosses are so good, the end is amazing. The end is one of the best bosses ever. I killed him last time with a kick on the head, which I was really surprised that I was able to do, actually. I kicked him while he was on the floor in the head and he died. I was like, wow, he actually gave me the camel. And the mouse in Nagant. I'm gonna still give it like a 4, but it's lower than the other ones, for sure. So again, splitting hairs, it would be a 5 compared to any other game. Or like a 4 and like a 4.9. But because we're comparing the games amongst themselves, I need to lower the thing. Now, gameplay feel, Metal Gear Solid 1, for its time, was the best game feel we had experienced by 1998. That's for sure. No question about that. Let me check it out. No question about that. But compared to today, it's still pretty good, don't get me wrong, but it's like a 3.5. It's not what it could be compared to the other games. Now, here everyone is gonna hate me, everyone's gonna, oh, you're crazy, blah, blah, because we're gonna talk about high-level tactics later and emergent complexity later. But Metal Gear Solid 2 is the best gameplay feel of all the Metal Gears. There's like small round things, like for example, when you go into first-person shooter in Metal Gear Solid 3, every time it resets the pitch to neutral for some reason, while in Metal Gear Solid 2, it actually respects your pitch, so you can go there, leave it there, and it stays there. In Metal Gear Solid 3, you have to keep the effort up, which you could say, oh, it's a skill issue. No, man, it's a quality of life issue. There's no need to do that. There's an argument in the speedrun community that, yeah, because you want to go into first person and tiptoe, and then you shoot straight at the head of the enemy directly. Yeah, okay, Metal Gear Solid 2 does the same and actually has auto-aim. So, you know, it does it better, it feels better. The movement feels better, the combat feels better, everything feels better in gameplay feel, and Metal Gear Solid 2 is by far the most fun to play in terms of tactile gameplay. So Metal Gear Solid 3 is like a 4 here, but wait, don't get crazy yet, because it's gonna be a 5 in the next one. So high-level tactics and emerging complexity, this category means for speedrunning, what crazy tactics can I do? Or can I combine systems in ways that are like interesting, right? So for example, throwing snakes at guards or destroying the food supply chain in Metal Gear Solid 3, making people hungry so they will actually go and eat a rotten food that you threw in front of them, and then they will have to run to the bathroom so they run out of their route. That is emerging complexity. High-level tactics is, for example, in Metal Gear Solid 2, my most famous world record was I figured out that you can go through the top of the collider inside an enemy and punch them in the groin as you fall, so you don't have to go behind them, punch them in the groin, cartwheel, and then move, because that makes you lose a lot of time. You can actually fall into them, hit them, and at the same time come out. And you go faster because you don't have to walk over them. So those high-level tactics don't exist in Metal Gear Solid 1. That's just how it is, so it gets a 1. Emerging complexity doesn't exist. I mean, maybe some details like being able to use cigarettes to reduce the movement of the PSG-1 or to show infrared, so okay, maybe 2, but it's like very, very low. In Metal Gear Solid 2, there's a lot of it in terms of like combat mechanics and things like that, shooting the pipes, shooting the shadows is amazing. The wet, technically the wet footsteps are also in one. Shooting the pipes, shooting the fire extinguishers and all that. So I'm gonna give it like a 4. By the way, all of the games have reload cancel, all of the games have things like that, so we cannot base on that because they all have it. But Metal Gear Solid 3 has the most, by a long shot. Actually, I'm gonna give 2 a 3 and 3 a 5 because it has way more. There's just no comparison, right? Like, there's so much emergent complexity, and it's not technically emergent complexity, it's just a lot of edge cases or like use cases, but it's really well done, and CQC is super cool. There's a lot of ways that you can beat the end, for example. Like, if you're a speedrunner like I am, there's millions of ways of finishing the game super fast. But Metal Gear Solid 2 also has that, by the way. I finished Bump in like 7 seconds the other day in the boss rush yesterday, which was a really surprise about. So that was impressive. Like, I was like, oh, I've been playing this game for 20 something years. I played this game for like hundreds of hours. I have 36 world records in it, and I didn't know I could do this. So that's just crazy. So I'm actually gonna give it a 4. AI. This section exists only to shit on Metal Gear Solid 2, actually. So the AI in Metal Gear Solid 1 is as good as it could have been. Like, there's nothing more you could have done. It's just like, it's a 5. Like, you couldn't do any more with PlayStation, right? So there you go. There's nothing to talk about there. Metal Gear Solid 3. The AI, I would give it a 4. It's pretty good. I mean, maybe a 5, maybe. But in Metal Gear Solid 2, it's a 3. Why? Or maybe a 4, but like a 3-4. Yeah. Why? Because, by the way, I have to change the ratings a little bit in a second, because this is not going to express what I need to talk about later. So the reason for that is that in Metal Gear Solid 2, if you play on easy, very easy, hard or extreme, or like very easy, extreme, and European extreme, the AI makes a lot of sense. In very easy and easy, you shoot them once, they fall down, blah blah. I mean, with the M9, with the tranquilizer. In a European extreme and extreme, you just cannot be seen because you're gonna get killed. It's an automatic fail. So it doesn't matter, like if the AI is tough or not to beat. But in normal, the AI actually, it's so well done. It's like so realistic that they will always win, always. As soon as you get seen in normal, you have to reset because you will not win the fight. And also, it's a bad design in the sense that they made it such a way that you can never fucking win. Like, maybe 1 every 10 times you get to manage into evasion mode or something. They force you to go into the next room, and in that room there's evasion mode, hopefully. But in some rooms the enemies go between rooms, and in some no. It's a fucking mess. So it's just like the worst thing about the game, probably, except for the pacing. By the way, so yes, let's see. Let me just check. Okay, yes, this is correct. So unfortunately, I have to add the AI section just to shit on Metal Gear Solid 2. Okay, 33 minutes. Let's continue. I think in 10 minutes we're done. Level design. Metal Gear Solid 1, as good as it gets for a PlayStation 1 game. Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Let's give it like, a 5. Metal Gear Solid 2. If you only think about the plant, which is what most people think about, it's like a 3.5 or a 4. The plant has really good level design, very good level design, but there's a lot of backtracking. So it's like a 4. But the tanker is amazing level design, it's a 5. But what most people don't think about Metal Gear Solid 2 is that there's more than 300 VR missions, and there's snake tails. And that level design accounts for all of those different situations, and it works in every single situation. Boss rush, by the way, as well. In all of those situations, and it works fantastically. So technically, it's like a 6 or a 7, like a 6. Because it's so good, I have to lower the other ones because I need to express how big the difference is, right? So Metal Gear Solid 3, the level design is pretty good. But the spaces, it does this kind of like open world thing. The level design is pretty good, but it's not that good. There's never a place where you're like, oh, I need to make a really interesting choice here. Like, which path do I take? Like, basically, you just put everyone to sleep and just walk straight, right? There's not like interesting choices, and the spaces are too small. There's not enough indoors places that force you to think interestingly. The only sections are like those ones that are like, with the Raiden's grandfather and stuff like that, and those are just like annoying. That's like the lowest point of the game. It's not really level design anymore. It's just like bad pacing. So I'm gonna give it like a 4 as well. Actually, I would say it's the lowest one. If Metal Gear is a 4, I'm gonna give it a 4.5, and then Metal Gear Solid 3 is a 4. Maybe it would need to be less actually to make sense. Now in content, Metal Gear Solid 1, sorry guys, it's a 2.5, because if you buy the VR missions extra disc or integral, if you only buy the normal game, it's a 1.5. Why? You have one campaign and 31 VR missions, I believe it is, including the survival. So, not bad, but not great, right? It's like, I mean, you can play Metal Gear Solid 1, like the replayability is pretty good, you know, you definitely want to finish it twice for sure, maybe 3-4 times, you know, if you're a little bit into the rankings and stuff like that, it's okay. Metal Gear Solid 2, on the other side, has over 300 VR missions, I think 5 or 6 Snake Tales, and 2 campaigns, because you can play the tanker and the plant separately as you wish. And the tanker is just insanely good, it's so good. The plant is, as a campaign, almost as good as Metal Gear Solid 3. But then, I played this game for like at least 600 hours, I remember. I played this game so much more with the VR missions. That's how I got my world records. Because you have like 6 characters, and each of them has like 100 missions or something. It's something ridiculous. So this is a 5. And Metal Gear Solid 3 is the lowest one of all, because you only have the campaign, and that's it. There's no VR missions, there's no, you have like the cinema, but you also have the cinema in Metal Gear Solid 2, although a little bit limited. In terms of replayability, for example, Metal Gear Solid 2 has a lot of replayability because you had the codes for like rankings online, which you don't have in any other Metal Gear, and that's how I got my records. So only that already puts it in another stratosphere. But getting the stealth for the tanker, the stealth for the plant, the infinite wick, and the bandana means that you have to replay both campaigns in every single difficulty mode, and it's not trivial because you're gonna have to play European Extreme and Extreme to get enough dog tags to get all of that. So it's just on another complete level. So here, I'm sorry, but Metal Gear Solid 3 gets a 1 because getting face paints is not needed. Getting the Tsukinoko is not needed. Okay, well, hitting all the Karatans, yeah, you could say that adds a little bit of like gameplay. Well, okay, a 1.5 now, it's nothing, you know, compared to Metal Gear Solid 2, which is like an insane amount of content. Then, sorry, but music, Metal Gear Solid 1. This time I have to do music in the opposite order. I have to start with Metal Gear Solid 3. Why? Because all the Metal Gear Solid games have amazing music, insane music, all of them. But because I'm comparing games to games, when Harry Gregson Williams came to Metal Gear Solid, in 2, he changed everything and it was so good. But Metal Gear Solid 3 has Harry Gregson Williams, a little bit less good than 2 in my opinion, a little bit, but you could argue, it's like a matter of taste really, you know? It's also very, very good. It's like, they're both like amazing, they're both 5s, right? But I have to lower 2. Why? Because 3 has Snake Eater by Cynthia Harron, and that is something so fucking iconic that if I don't give it a 5, I know that all you guys are gonna come into my house and kick me. So I need to give it a 5. And by comparison, I'm gonna give 2 a 4.5 because it's missing Snake Eater, and then I'm gonna give Metal Gear Solid 1 a 4. Because Metal Gear Solid 1 still has really, really good music. The synthesizer style is a little bit more school. Actually, I'm gonna lower it to 3.5 because half of the songs in Metal Gear Solid 1 are reused from Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2. not Metal Gear Solid, Metal Gear 1 and 2. So it's not so original, but they're really good. The atmospheric themes are really good. The ping stint is still, like, I hear people like using it today who don't know what Metal Gear Solid is, using it on like their streams and stuff. I'm like, man, how can this even be? So it's completely iconic, yeah, but it's not at the level of Harry Gregson Williams, obviously. Also, like the really famous Metal Gear Solid song, technically was stolen from some Russian music or something. I mean, that's legal problems and it doesn't matter so much to me. But it's like, yeah, maybe I give it a 4, but it's clearly Snake Eater is like the big deal. I mean, I remember spending time. I went karaoke with Koji Igarashi, the creator of Castlevania. Well, not the creator, but like the inventor of what we think now as Castlevania, and singing Snake Eater with him, and it was super fun. And that song is just absolutely iconic. Now, atmosphere and art style. So, Metal Gear Solid 1 is a 5, straight up. The art style for what it is for a PlayStation 1 game is insane. Graphics technically and artistically are insane. The atmosphere is unparalleled in video game history. I think only maybe Midgar in Final Fantasy VII, the original one, can deal that level of atmosphere. I can think of any games that are at that level. It's just incredible. Metal Gear Solid 1 has an insane atmosphere. It's something unparalleled. So it just wins there. Metal Gear Solid 2, the tanker, has a great atmosphere. Very similar to Metal Gear Solid 1, very, very similar. The plant, not so much. I mean, yeah, I know what they were trying to do, particularly like with Emma, I was very impressed by the lens flares and all that stuff during the shooting section on Strat L and all that stuff. But it's not as nice. It's good, but it's not on that level. It's not epic, like really like Homeric tale kind of quality, So I would give it like a 4, I guess. I don't want to get into like 4.2s and stuff like that. And then Metal Gear Solid 3, honestly, I think it has very low atmosphere. I don't feel the atmosphere. A little bit, but very, very low, like a 2, out of 5. Very, very low. People say, oh, the James Bond thing, but the atmosphere is not there, like the James Bond thing is like the music, the narrative, but not really the, excuse me, wow, 42 minutes already. But not really the atmosphere. So I'm afraid I'm gonna have to give it a 2.5. The art style is good, particularly in characters, but we already talked about characters. But when it comes to the world, it's a little bit like, yeah, it's just like forest, even like Grosnigrad and all of that stuff is not that interesting. By the way, another reason why the characters and bosses of Metal Gear Solid 1 are the best is because Metal Gear Rex is fucking awesome. And Metal Gear Ray is fucking awesome, but Shago Hot is just like, yeah, it's okay, it's cool, But it really, the bar really dropped a lot in this sense, so I'm gonna give it like a 2.5. I'm sorry guys, I know you all love Metal Gear Solid 3, but this is just how it is. So there we have it. Let's do our quick run through to make sure that everything makes sense, and I will tell you why I say that Metal Gear Solid 3, why I understand that everyone says Metal Gear Solid 3 is the best, but why I don't agree. Narrative, Metal Gear Solid 1, yes, okay, yes, could lower it. Pacing, yes. You could argue that Metal Gear Solid 3's pacing is not that good, actually, because of the Raikovich part. Yeah, I think a 4 is fair. Characters and bosses, Metal Gear Solid 1 is amazing. Metal Gear Solid 2, because of Solidus, is very high, and Ray is really cool. Metal Gear Solid 3, because of the what were they called, the sons of the boss, things like the fear, the end, and stuff like that. I mean, boss is cool too. Vol'jin is kind of cool. Sokolov is not very cool. Yeah, like 4 compared to a 5 of Metal Gear Solid 1. Yeah, something like that. Gameplay feel, yeah, absolutely. I might could lower Metal Gear Solid 3 a little bit, but it's fair. This is a 4.5, I think, because the high-level tactics are more doable in Metal Gear Solid 2, but the emerging complexity in Metal Gear Solid 3 is bigger, so it's around there. It's really close. I mean, 3 is better, but not a lot. You know? AI, yeah. Okay. Level design in Metal Gear Solid 1. I might drop it up, actually. I might bring it up to 5. Because we have content here. Okay, yeah. I would say the difference is so big between Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2 that Metal Gear Solid 1 is a 2 and Metal Gear Solid 2 is a 5. Yeah, I would say that's fair. This should be a 1 actually, but yeah, I'm sorry, it has to be a 1. It's like, why 1.5? Why? Like, because of the kerotans? I mean, no one's gonna do that. Like, I did it, but I'm a weirdo. Like, you know, I played these games for hundreds of hours. Music, yes. I would say, yeah. I mean, you could argue that Metal Gear Solid 1 is a 4.5. They're all 5s, don't get me wrong, but because Snake Eater is in 3, I have to lower the other ones. An atmosphere, I would say this is fair. I mean, if you want to lower this to 3.5 because of how long the plant is and how short the tanker is, I could accept that. Yeah, so okay, so this is more or less, this is the previous video that I made, and the scores are very similar, actually almost exactly the same. I think there's only a difference of half a point, or 1 point in each case. Yeah, 1 point lower in each case for some reason. I don't know where I did it. It looks like in high-level gameplay, something like that. It doesn't matter. This is the new one, so this is the one that I explained today, or in this video. I know I had to make the video twice, so I'm very tired by now, but we're almost finished. So here's my summary. And ranking the games. Metal Gear Solid 2 gets the highest score. Yes, by the skin of their teeth, to Metal Gear Solid 1. And both of them are over Metal Gear Solid 3. Now, why does everyone say that Metal Gear Solid 3 is the best one? I know why, and I will explain it right now. Look at the graphs. Metal Gear Solid 1, high, low, high, low, high. Metal Gear Solid 2, high, low, high, low, high, medium. Metal Gear Solid 3, not super high, but high, high, low, high, low. This here explains why everyone loves Metal Gear Solid 3 the most. Metal Gear Solid 3 is the best average Metal Gear Solid game. If you average all the things in a Metal Gear Solid game, it is the best Metal Gear Solid game. However, it doesn't have as great as moments as Metal Gear Solid 1 or Metal Gear Solid 2, but it also doesn't have as bad moments as Metal Gear Solid 1 or Metal Gear Solid 2. That is to say, Metal Gear Solid 3 at its worst gameplay moment is better than Metal Gear Solid 1. At its worst narrative moment is better than Metal Gear Solid 2, or pacing moment is better than Metal Gear Solid 2, but it is also a little bit worse than Metal Gear Solid 1, right? So that's the thing. It's always in the middle. It's very high, but it's in the middle. It doesn't make any great mistakes, but also doesn't excel at anything except the music and the emerging gameplay. That's like the two things that it does really, really well. But in everything else, either Metal Gear Solid 1 or Metal Gear Solid 2 do it better, right? So that's finally the explanation why everyone loves Metal Gear Solid 3 so much. For me, I've always said it. Metal Gear Solid 3 is like the best game. But why is it the best when Metal Gear Solid 1 is a better story? It's a better movie. It's better characters. And if a Metal Gear Solid 2 is a better game, gameplay-wise, and it has more meta, how can it be that Metal Gear Solid 3 is still considered the best? And finally, I have an explanation. I mean, this is obviously subjective because this is my interpretation of it, and I would absolutely love it if anyone tries to prove me wrong and tells me, no, but you know, like, you're wrong. The atmosphere in Metal Gear Solid 3 is actually a 5. Okay, let's talk about it. Let's talk about why. Or the AI in Metal Gear Solid 2 is actually 5. I would actually argue that the Metal Gear Solid 2 AI is a 5, but then again, if I said that this is a game for Metal Gear Solid 3 and Metal Gear Solid 1, I have to be fair and also say that Metal Gear Solid 2 is also a game, right? It doesn't work to have realistic rules if the game is not fun, right? So this is basically what I've realized over the last few days. And it's also what I've been thinking probably for the last 10, 15 years is what I was suspecting as well that was happening. So finally I have a solution or like an answer to my question, and I hope that everyone found it at least a little bit interesting. I know it's a little bit nerdy to get into this level of analysis of 20-something-year-old games, but I also think these games are just absolutely fantastic. Like, again, we're splitting hairs here. Like, basically, what we're saying is like, okay, Metal Gear Solid 2 is a 9.8 game. Metal Gear Solid 1 is a 9.75. And Metal Gear Solid 3 is a 9.65 kind of game out of 10, right? So they're absolutely masterpieces. Everyone should play the three of them. Let me put it this way. I think these games are worthy of being put on a DVD of media that represents the best that humanity has to offer, to give it to an alien species and be like, hey guys, these are the best games of all time. Here is Tetris, and here is Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, or 3, I don't care which one. They're all so good that they're gonna be like, holy shit, these guys know how to make games, man. But I would finish by summarizing saying, I would say for a first time player, Metal Gear Solid 1 is the best game if they're old enough to have played PlayStation 1 games and like them. Otherwise it would be Metal Gear Solid 3. I would say that for general gameplay enjoyment, 2 wins by a long distance by the amount of content and the amount of quality. And if you say, I want the best of both worlds, I want the best of everything, I would say go for Metal Gear Solid 3. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think, and thanks for watching. Cheers.